video, I will be painting a seascape with watercolor and gouache. I took this photo on the island of Port Aransas here in Texas, and I would like to capture all those beautiful greens and blues that I see in it. There is a lot going on, lots of details, a tangle of masts and rigging, so this will be an exercise in simplification. We will try to paint the impression of this sunny spring day without going into too much detail. I am going to start with a pencil sketch. I like to draw the horizon line using a ruler so I don't tilt it. That's the worst thing in landscapes, when the horizon is going all wonky. So give myself a good reference point, and then I will just sketch roughly the shapes. I'm not going to figure out which mast belongs to which boat. I am just looking at light and dark shapes and drawing the overall outline. There will be maybe 3 boats that are closest to us that I will try to get a little more detailed, but further down I don't even see what's going on there. And you can actually see it better in the photo than in real life because it was really sunny day, so it was kind of hard to see in the distance. I will start by painting the background with watercolor. Gouache is not easy to spread, so I think starting with watercolor background, first of all it kills the white of the paper, and then we'll already give ourselves a pretty quick start. Because we have some color on paper, we have distributed our colors a little bit, and then we can paint the details with gouache. It will be a lot easier. So using a flat brush, damp paper, I'm going to paint just a quick wet on wet wash with my watercolors. I already used this technique on a bouquet of flowers in a vase, and I think it worked out pretty well. You can check out that tutorial if you're interested. So this will be a similar approach, but painting a landscape, painting a seascape. Watercolor that I'm painting looks a lot more intense than the reference photo, but it's because when it dries it will lighten, so I am applying it a little bit more saturated on purpose. I'm also going to lift some clouds with a paper towel. Now all this needs to dry, and meanwhile I'm going to prepare my gouache. I am going to use my Himi gouache set. It has a lot of good greens and blues that I don't have to mix, so I really want to use it for this painting. Also has a beautiful kind of tallow blue color. The problem is that it all dried. I was painting with it outside and I had it for a while, so a lot of pigments are cracked and they're hard to pick up. I'm going to reconstitute them using ox gall. This is a liquid that we use to improve the flow of watercolor. I saw a tip online. Gouache painter Elena Rivo was recommending to use watercolor medium to reconstitute gouache. I did not honestly pay attention which brand or exactly what she was recommending, but I immediately thought about that bottle of ox gall that I have. Since it's one of watercolor mediums, I thought I would use that and see what happens. So I don't have a pipette to add this, but I'll just carefully pour it from the bottle, and I'm using some wood skewers to mix up the paint. It takes a bit of effort to get everything stirred properly, but I'll show you in a second what the consistency looks like after it's all done. They became soft and creamy again, and I can actually work with them. It took me a while to mix them all up, but it was definitely worth it because I just hated to waste them, and some of them were unusable. I couldn't pick them up anymore, they were so dry. But ox gall seems to do the trick and restore the creaminess of my gouache. It's all ready for me to paint with it. I'm going to work on the darker shapes that I see in my reference photo. Since I switched to an opaque medium, I need to go from dark to light, as opposed to watercolor that we paint from light to dark. So I'm painting the shadow sides of the boats and those distant buildings that I see in the middle left. And I will also kind of start working on the reflections a little bit. They will be slightly lighter than the boats, but pretty similar actually in tone. Then moving on to darkest darks, I'm using that phthalo blue that's included in the set. It's very nice dark blue color. I always use it instead of black. Black is in the set is actually warmer than this blue, so it tends to come forward, which we don't want. Using a flat brush. Lots of vertical and horizontal lines in this painting, and it's much easier to paint them with a flat brush because it gives us line consistency that we need. I'm working on 11 by 14 sheet of watercolor paper, and I can tell you this is probably the smallest format that I would go with. I can maybe shrink it an inch or two, but I can't imagine painting something like that in maybe like a tiny sketchbook because there are so many details. And we will have to use a really tiny brush with 3 hairs in it to actually get them. Even on this size paper, I'm thinking already how I'm going to paint all those masts and all the rigging and things like that. But I think I have an idea how to do that. I'll show you in just a second. I think I know how to do it quickly and much easier than doing it with a brush. So working on my shapes on dark midtones and darks, trying to get a little bit definition to my painting. This will be also a good exercise if you like watercolor but you struggle a little bit with paint control. When we paint with watercolor, there are just so many things to think about at the same time. I often recommend my students to start with gouache to actually understand the painting, how colors work, how they mix, how to build up tonal relationships before switching to watercolors. So if you're struggling with watercolor a little bit, my recommendation is to paint with gouache, which is an opaque water medium. It's not toxic, it doesn't smell, it's easy cleanup, but it will be much easier for you to control. And after you kind of train your eye and you get better at capturing shapes and proportions and colors, then go to watercolor, because if you can't paint at all, starting with watercolor can be very, very frustrating. And painting is something we do for pleasure and for fun. It shouldn't be frustrating, it shouldn't be hard and exasperating. I deepened the color of the water with some gouache, but I don't want all these brush strokes, so I am trying to smooth them out with a big flat brush. I want a little bit of texture, obviously, because there are some ripples on the water, but I don't want them too pronounced. There are no big waves or anything like that, so this needs to be smoothed out. Gouache can be thinned with water and applied as a wash. That's what I'm basically doing now. And you see I'm going a lot darker than the reference photo because I will be adding some white in just a second and everything will lighten back up. I need a base to apply my lighter colors. Lost some of those piers where the boats are parked. Like I said, lots of horizontal and vertical lines. Painting and everything looked very green and blue. So what I want to do now is move on to my midtones and light midtones, but I also want to vary the color a little bit. I see very slight like purple or pink reflection in the water coming from the sky somewhere or something, but we can even exaggerate it a little bit. I'm using this pale pink color, mixing it with some blue, some green, maybe drop in a little bit of yellow to get and turquoise in some places, maybe a little even orange glow, just to vary the color of the water so it's not all uniformly blue and green. My inspiration here is Renoir's painting. Maybe you remember I painted a replica of Renoir's The Skiff, a boat on a river with a couple of girls in it. And it was really amazing how Renoir showed water. I'll leave you the link to that tutorial in the description below the video if you want to check it out, but he really found a lot of different colors in the water, and I kind of want to do something similar. Find all these colors and make my painting a lot more colorful than what I see in real life, what I see in my reference. Let's brighten up the clouds a little bit. I was glad there were some clouds in the sky, because a lot of times here in Texas the sky is just blue and there's nothing going on there. But I was fortunate that day there were some pretty clouds in the sky. Okay, it's time to work on the masts and the rigging on the boats. I mixed up some dark paint, and I think instead of trying to paint those straight lines with a brush and risking messing them up, I am going to use a card. That's my old library card, and I'm just going to get some paint on the edges and kind of imprint those masts on paper. I'm sure you've seen this trick before. I've never used it. This is my first time using a card to paint with, but I would say it works great. I got some lines, they're uneven, which I actually like. They kind of look more painterly. I don't think I could have done this with a brush successfully. I would sure mess up somewhere, but you get nice straight lines, and by varying the color, picking up darker or lighter color, I can also achieve that depth of space in my painting that I need. You see, my painting immediately is starting to take shape and starting to look more like boats. And if I need to, I can make some small corrections with a very fine brush. Shorter lines in the distance are easy to paint with a brush, just a few flicks of the brush and they will be done. So let's work on some smaller details. I switched to a very small round brush. I'm going to paint the railings on the closer boats, all those little windows and details that the boats have. I can verify all the shapes. I'm going to zoom in a little closer so you can see. I'm using basically the same few colors, some darker and lighter blues, some white, and I have that dark mixture of phthalo blue and alizarin crimson. That's dark purple color that I use as black. Working on my lights now on the boats, and also lightening some areas in the water, painting those lighter reflections in the water. I am kind of regretting that I started on a smaller piece of paper. I guess I was too scared that this is not going to turn out, but I think a detailed seascape like this would work a lot more appealing on a larger sheet of paper. Maybe this will be my sketch and then I will paint it larger, and maybe use more watercolor and just paint smaller details with gouache, because gouache gives us a lot more control. But I've been really interested in seascapes, and then boats. Shrimp boats also look very interesting. They have a lot of details, and I think they definitely need larger format to do them justice, to do justice to that subject matter. Let's lighten the water in the distance. Like I said, I painted it darker on purpose so I can add some lighter reflections on it. The boats reflect in it, but also the clouds reflect in the water, creating lighter areas. So this is kind of a fiddling stage where we balance everything, we add details, and just in general try to give our painting more finished look. I think the overall time that I worked on that painting, it was probably close to 3 hours, so not a fast process. Gouache takes longer than watercolor, but finally I'm done. Here is the finished painting. Let me know what you think about this technique, if I should try to paint this larger. Have you ever used a plastic card to paint with? Thank you so much for watching, and I hope to see you in the next video here on Tamirov Studios channel. Help other artists to see this video by liking or sharing it. To see future videos, subscribe and click the bell button to be notified when they're published. Thanks again and stay creative!